Hello again, everybody. This is Derek, and I'm coming back at you with another wargaming and miniature video. In today's video, we're going to continue on with our MeG boot camp from Mortem et Gloriam. We are out of Chapter 9. We're now in Chapter 10, and 10 and beyond is pretty much some optional rules or some expanded or advanced rules. So let's go ahead and get into them. Chapter 10 is Fog of War. Okay, real generals did not have the benefit of tables and factors that they could calculate the odds. More often, they didn't even know what they were up against, and many died under the belief their troops were better than their opponents. When our historically informed army lists tell us otherwise, indeed, they were often rather in the dark about how their own troops would perform, never mind the enemy. If only they had read the rule book. For those of you who want some extra fun and to have more of the chaotic feel and worries of a real general, here's a set of optional rules. These rules work very well in playing a campaign. If doing these, you need to have a high level of trust for your opponent and both play to the spirit of the idea. Always represent the troops with the right figures of the right look. Gradual troop declaration. Use this to give increased fog of war. At deployment, only declare things an opponent could see and declare the rest only as first needed in the rules. So, at deployment, declare only the type, formation they're in, and weapons that they're carrying or shooting with. These are late Roman legionnaires deployed in close order with impact weapons and darts. As an example, okay. Leave it to your opponent to figure out training types from the army lists and your moves, even if not clear from the army lists. Eventually, the cards and moves will reveal the level of training. When shooting, declare skills and quality for the target before rolling the first dice. When fighting for the first time, declare the quality and all characteristics. For example, I'm so sorry, but these legionaries are the exceptional 10th Legion. Variable quality of troops in general. This is more dramatic. Anyone can have a bad day, or vice versa. To represent this, after deployment, roll a green for every general. On an S, they are feeling stupid and having a bad day and drop the grade. Minimum mediocre. On a skull, they're having a good day and go up a grade. Maximum legendary. When a troop quality is first declared, roll the above green. On an S, they're feeling sluggish and drop a quality level. On a skull, they are up a quality level. So basically, you're randomizing your army by doing that. Fog of War Pack. For an additional level of fun, create a special pack to use with events on the cards. This can create some spectacular fun games with amazing narratives, and often feel more real as the chaos of battle is even more efficient. Make a standard MeG deck of command cards and put a special feature that can be used instead of its normal use onto 6 each of the cards that are red, yellow, green, and white. Leave the black cards with no special effects. White. Have 3 fast moves and 3 great maneuvers. A fast move is 1 extra base width of movement, and a great maneuver uses a column better training for this action. On the green dice, you can have, green card, you can have slow enemy or hesitate in the enemy, add one base slowing effect to an enemy UG, or take one card at random from an enemy general. The yellow could have Great Skirmish, Great Runaway, Discover Ambush, Flank March Warning, Catch Enemy, or Bribe the Ally. So Great Skirmish would be shoot a die color up. Great Runaway would be shoot without dropping a die color. Discover Ambush, reveal an ambush. Flank March Warning, enemy must reveal size and composition of his flank march. Catch the enemy, you get an extra base width of movement on a charge, if you can catch anything. And Bribe the Ally, cancel out a hesitate ally's first red card drawn. Because if you didn't know, allies don't actually do anything until they get like a red card. And then on the red cards, you can have Assassin, Potent Charge, Deadly Shooting, Instant Arrival, Sabotage, and Die to Man. Assassin, attempt an enemy general of your choice, get a cab test. Potent Charge, they get Devastating Charge. Deadly Shooting, gain extra skill for the shot. Instant Arrival, any flank march arrives now. Sabotage, you get 3 cab tests on the enemy camp. And Die to a Man. UG within 1 base of break converts to Fanatic for the rest of the game. Generals increase their card limit by 1 to allow for a special effect to be used regularly without detracting from their normal movement. All special features can be played at any time where their effect is usable in addition to their normal action. Note that some affect opponents, so could be applied to their opponent's actions instead. Once they have been played, set them aside so that gradually they all get used once, and replace them with a similarly colored card from a normal pack. You will gradually end up with a normal MeG command pack once all the specials have been used. Okay, so if you're using sleeves like I am, you could just slide something down inside the sleeve, right? And then, inside, well, not in the black, of course, but yeah, you could slide like a little piece of paper inside the sleeve, and then once it's been used, you just pull that little piece of paper out. Reenacting prompted action table. We definitely err on the side of allowing troops greater flexibility in movement than was likely in real ancient battles. Not massively so, but it does make a better game. If you are refighting battles and want to limit movement more, there is a version of the prompted action table on the website that I use for historical refights. It raises the cost of some of the more difficult moves. Put all 4 of these together and we might just have an idea of how a general felt in charge of his army. No wonder Napoleon liked lucky generals. Okay, that was Fog of War. Now we're going to talk about, basically Fog of War just adds an element of randomness to your game if you like that sort of thing. Okay, the next one is campaign rules. If you got, okay, let's talk about the campaign rules. It says, if only I had the time, campaigns are by far my favorite type of wargaming, but they take some time, organization, and determination to get them to conclusion and not fizzle out. I have run 5 in my time that made it, but another 4 that didn't. If you have the time and a little dedication, I heartily recommend it. To get you started, here's a system for campaigns, and you will find a few campaign settings on the website. Campaign map. First, find a historical map of the campaign you want to fight. Here's one of the Gaul and the later Roman Empire. Shows a picture in the book. The system we have with territory types is very helpful. Overlay the map with a set of squares and then color code those squares to the MeG territory types, and you have a campaign map. So basically what they're saying is, like if you take France and Spain, and you take a map of that, and Germany, and then you break it up into squares, and like where it's water, you paint it blue, and where it's coastal, that would be all the squares next to the coast. And then if there's like woods, like Teutoburg Forest or something like that, you mark that as forest. And if there's some major towns like Rome or Orleans or Alesia, you mark those on your campaign map. Armies move one square per campaign turn. When a battle is fought, that is the territory type of the battle. Army location is a simple code such as E7, so a lot like basically just put letters along one side and then numbers along the top, and that way you get like your battleship code or whatever. Map moves can be declared simultaneously. On the website, you can find a version of Caesar in Gaul using spreadsheets where you secretly move your armies, and a shared sheet tells you where you have made contact. Add to the squares a value in points to represent the troops that owning the territory may sustain, or in the case of an invasion, a number of points that may be risen as the square is entered. That's what they use in Caesar and Gaul. When armies meet, treat the player who moved into the square as the invader. If either side wants to refuse the battle, they may retire to an adjacent square, and the opponent gets to see their army list and roll a cab test on every UG. This mechanism represents a campaign morale not lasting and being a reason for armies to fight, especially if they have low morale and may disintegrate over time. To continuously retire will not inspire your troops. A result can be created using the online spreadsheet tool called the Fast Result Generator on the website, which works off the points values for the two armies and the territory type. If there is a battle, play the battle normally as per the rules, possibly using Fog of War supplements. After the battle, armies are moved on the map as follows. If there is a triumph, the loser retires into an adjacent space of his choosing and gathers remaining forces as per the campaign losses below. In the case of a draw, the player with the highest damage done score keeps the territory and the other retires. In the case of a tie, both armies withdraw. Okay, campaign losses. Bases lost represent morale, injury, and lack of cohesion, as well as casualties. As a result, bases lost or broken in the game have a chance of returning. If there is a triumph, the victor pursues and aims to wipe out the enemy army. Mounted troops can be overrun stragglers. The loser permanently loses one base for every base of cavalry, camelry, or chariots left on the table on the victorious army. Take those remaining on the table in the loser's army from the lowest quality level upwards, so all poor bases are wiped out, then average, and so on. Both sides then have a chance of the other bases lost in this battle returning. Take some d6 and roll one die for each base and do them in batches of the same troop types. Bases return to the army on a 4 or better, so 50% chance. Bases return to the army and are regrouped into their legal UG sizes. You can downgrade troops as necessary to make up legal UGs. For example, if you have 2 drilled superior protected skilled cavalry and 2 that are formed average unprotected experienced, you can downgrade the former to make a legal tug of the latter. Any remaining bases that cannot thus form an UG are lost. You now have the composition of the two armies going forward. So every battle doesn't start like with 10,000 points or whatever. Because after your first battle, you're going to lose bases. And so your next battle, it's going to be with a reduced army. Battle experience. As troops fight, they gain experience and courage. After a battle, troops may upgrade. Roll a d6 per tug and apply the following rules. Poor troops upgrade on a 4, 5, or 6. Average troops upgrade to superior on a 5 or 6. Superior upgrade to exceptional on a 6. And SUGs go up on a 6. Okay, so even though your troop numbers are going down, the skill quality is going up. Okay, the next thing is weather. Roll 2d6 on the weather table, taking into account the territory and type of season for the weather table below. Okay, on the weather table you've got roll 2d6. If it's winter, it's -2. If it's summer, it's +2. And then depending on the territory type, like standard, plains, coastal, mountains, forest, jungle, or desert, you compare your roll, which the best you can get is a 14 in summer, and the worst you can get is a 0 in winter. You cross-reference, and you get either hot, good weather, strong winds, rain, heavy rain, or snow. And in the desert, you might get dust storms or extreme heat. And it tells you what those each do, like uphill bonuses for snow and light rain, shooting, and then like heat, night game, command range is halved. Okay. All right. Sieges. Sieges are often best resolved using the fast result generator on the website. Don't play out or fight a siege, because what you're doing is you're just putting figures around a castle and they're just sitting there. Okay. All UGs may adapt themselves for siege as follows. And it talks about close order can become flexible. Talking about spears and cavalry can dismount and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of information, but recommend using the website. Now, UGs defending fortifications can have their bases spread out along the walls, and each base controls a perimeter, one base width to either side of it. So, like wider. No enemy can cross onto the walls into a space in one of these areas. Instead, they must fight. Now, a fortified town or something should have a road system of 2 base width wide roads around its perimeter just inside the walls. It should also have a central square that is at least 4 base width square. These areas are good going. All other areas in the town are rough going. A fortified built-up area should be deployed to entirely cover at least a 20 base width wide by 10 base width deep area. So if you're making a built-up area, you basically need 2 10 base width city pieces of terrain. And there should be a 2 base width gateway every 10 base widths. Interesting. Now, over time, troops build tools to allow them to attack. After one map move, Ugs may have ladders. After 2 map moves, they may have a battering ram. After 3 map moves, any army with a professional army commander may build 1 siege engine for each 4 tugs. After 4 map moves, any army with a professional army commander who is talented or better may dig 2 mines to collapse sections of walls. Wow. So that's basically, in the campaign game, sitting in siege for many, many moons. Okay. Chapter 12. Competitions. Okay. MeG, I think, was designed as a 1v1, but it's also designed to easily be used in like organized tournaments and things like that. I think it seems like it's adaptable to campaigns, it's adaptable to scenarios, but I think it was originally designed for competitions, a lot like Field of Glory or DBA. Okay. Now remember, when I read I grew up or I own this or whatever, it's referring to Simon Hall, which is the game designer who wrote these rules, not Derek. It says, I grew up thinking competitions would be tense, unpleasant affairs. The reality is that they are fantastic social events full of friendly enthusiasts. I find them enormously fun, and now must have played somewhere between 200 and 300 tournaments around the globe. I heartily recommend them to you. Give it a go. Here are some guidelines for organizers. Now, I've considered organizing down maybe at NashCon or something like that, a MeG tournament. Okay, competition types. You have single or doubles. Ultimate Glorium can be played as a single-player game or in pairs. For doubles, each player must control 2 generals each. Both players may make an action at any time with a single player would do so in a single game. All players must pass to end the phase. The 2-pass rule applies to each individual player, not each side, so usually one player will declare themselves as finished before the other. Team events. A fun alternative is teams of 3 to 4 players playing different historical periods. Army sizes. Here we go. This is where it's at. The recommended army sizes are Pacto, 3,500 points. Anything from 3,000 to 4,500 points works. They're saying that it takes about an hour and a half to play a 3,500 point game, so you should be able to get 4 to 5 games in a day. That's Pacto. Magna, 7,000 points for a 2-hour game. You'll get 3 to 4 games in a day. So anything from 6,000 to 8,000 points works. And Maximus, 10,000 points. For a 3-hour game, you're only going to get 2 to 3 games in a day, but they're saying anything from 8,000 to 12,000 points works. I am working on like 8,000 point Magna armies. So 2-hour games, which I think is a very reasonable amount of time. Okay, next, period choice. The rules work well for open periods, so there is no need to restrict army choice. While unhistorical, it is quite possible to beat a Teutonic Order army with a New Kingdom Egyptian. Themed periods work even better. It is best to choose a classical, Dark Age, medieval, biblical theme, as the lists have been gathered to work well together. You can also restrict it to dates and or geographical area. So basically you can narrow it down as much as you want. Army choice. You can let people choose their army freely or only allow an army to the first entry choosing it. That means you won't have 2 Romans and 2 Macedonians and 2 Carthaginians. You would only have the first. A great way to get this list in early. Or have a set of armies that people choose from in an order you determine. If a repeat competition, the latter can work very nicely by having the lowest ranked player have the first choice. So, like if you play in 1999 and then you're going to play again in 2000, you give that the losing players, the ones that got eliminated first out of the tournament, you allow them to choose their armies first. But I probably wouldn't do that because people are limited to what armies they have and what they want to play. So I would probably put it in if I was to run a tournament, I would probably limit it to a time so that you don't have your English longbowmen going up against Hittites. Unequal points. Variations can be interesting to try. I used to run a competition called Rear Guard, where everyone has a small, medium, and large version of their army and play 1-to-1 games with each other at their choice. That's interesting. So you can decide to play with a small army, medium, or large. You play 3 games and you can choose one. Okay, that's interesting. Duplicate. Put people in pairs with 2 identical armies on one table. The team plays with their own army. On the other table, they borrow the opponent's army. The score between 2 teams is as pure as you can get. It is a fine test of how quickly someone can pick up an unfamiliar army. And of course, there can be some very unusual designs as both sides are stuck with the same challenges. So basically you have 2 Roman armies going up against each other, and you've got, or you swap the players. Like I play the Roman army on one table, but I play the Carthaginians on the other table. Scenarios and terrain. If you have the energy and figures, set up games with specific objectives. This way, you can have a game which is an ambush on a column on the march, or a night attack on a camp, or a river crossing. Games that only work in competitions if everyone is facing them. Victory point scoring. The scoring system is shown on the Army Builder and encourages positive play. It is very simple, but one of the breakthroughs in MeG, you may have to think about how you can win a game. Bloody failures are always better than bloodless draws. If one side breaks the other army without losing their own army, it wins a triumph. And if Roman gets to parade around the streets of Rome in a chariot, a triumph gets you 15 victory points. In all other circumstances, players get a score based on the damage they have done. It's called their damage done score. This is simply based on the number of enemy UGs destroyed or broken. 2 victory points per tug and 1 victory point per SUG. Up to 10 victory points. If there was a draw with neither army breaking, or in the rare event, both sides breaking, then both sides get +2 victory points. So a draw gets you +2 victory points. A mutual destruction will usually get you a 12-12. Yeah, because 2 victory points per tug, up to 10, plus 2 more for mutual destruction. Organizers should use victory points to decide the winner in the event. If a tie, they should use it as tie breakers. 1. The damage done. 2. Result of any direct game between players. And 3. Damage caused against in the last game. The scoring system encourages positive play and makes sure all games are fun. Sitting out a draw where you do no damage to each other will score you 2-2 draw. So we get very few such boring games. Losing, but doing a lot of damage, might get you somewhere between 10 and 15 points. Fighting a bloody draw or mutual destruction might get you 12. It's all to play for, so never give up the always keep trying to do more damage to your enemy. Truly, there is never a dull game of mortem et gloriam. Conventions. Okay, conventions is very near and dear to my heart. Lists. Players must bring the army list from which they have selected their army with them and share it with their opponent at the beginning of the game. Not everyone is carrying all 650 army lists. Special rules. A player must point out any special rules that apply to their army and how it works. Army double check. Armies should be checked against army designs after the first game. Occasionally, an organizer will miss an error in an army design, or a player will make an honest error. Doing this ensures it is picked up after the game, rather than after game 4. Any error must be corrected before the next game. Clarifications. Organizers should have the official clarifications from the website printed on the walls. These apply to all games. It is useful to circulate them to players a few days before the event. Umpires say is final. Where an issue arises is not covered by the rules, try to resolve it yourself or agree to a die roll. Otherwise, the umpire will make a decision with their best assessment of the intent of the author in such situations, and their decision is final. Remember, they are doing a difficult task as a favor to you so you can enjoy your weekend. Rolling the wrong dice. If a player rolls too few dice, just add those needed. If either player rolls the wrong color of dice, simply re-roll the correct one if noticed before proceeding. If a player rolls too many dice, use a d6 to remove dice at random down to the correct number. So if you're supposed to roll 5 and you roll 6 and you get a bunch of skulls and a blank, you gotta keep that roll, but you gotta roll a die to see which one comes up instead of re-rolling. Because if you re-roll, you might get a bunch of blanks, right? Okay. Tidy tables. Always imagine taking a photo of your game and how it looks to others. We are seeking to promote our hobby and game. Politely nudge each other when it looks cluttered. Players should aim to keep their table tidy at all times. Like me, dice and markers. Removing all markers immediately, they have no longer required, and keeping cards, discs, markers, dice neatly away from the game. Put casualties away in boxes as you don't need them for anything. You can tell when an army breaks from what is on the table. If you must leave them out, then put them in neat columns away from the action. Yeah, basically just try to keep your table neat and without clutter. That's always a good rule, even at home. Terrain. Our game deserves to look great. Terrain should have a quality that matches the quality of the game we are playing. Unpainted figures all fight combat shy. That's official. Oh, so you can play with unpainted figures. Interesting. All right, now I just want to kind of go over the characteristics very quickly. Melee expert. Okay, infantry with melee expert gives a claim or an up in melee combat, except elephants and expendables. Cavalry and chariots with melee expert give a bonus except against troops that would be able to keep them at a safe distance, which is shield wall in good going, or deep long spear or pikes in good going, or against elephants. Combat shy. Combat shy gives a claim to opponents in both charge and melee. So basically it means that they're you get a bonus against combat shy. Devastating chargers. Devastating charger gives a claim versus certain opponents in charge combat in any terrain as long as they are 2 ranks deep. Can cause a shatter even in 1 rank. They have forced charges against enemy tugs directly ahead within 3 base widths, and cannot have their pursuits shortened by playing a prompted action. So they're like uncontrollable. Shatter. Shatter covers troops. Okay. Shatter, when claimable, occurs on a skull or an S, except when fighting 2 rank deep shield wall. Shatter. Shatter troops are good at punching holes. This also includes devastating chargers. Shatter, when claimable, occurs on a skull or an S, except when fighting 2 rank deep shield wall, unless you're an elephant, or versus elephants, versus barricades or obstacles, except unless you're an elephant. Shatter may be claimed in any terrain. Elephants or devastating chargers. If fighting in good going, the following may claim shatter: charging lancers or mounted polearms. And shatter gives a +2 to neighboring files in charge combat only, so not melee. Okay, shove. Shove's a little bit different than shatter. They're good at pushing units back, like your classical phalanx. Shove occurs on a skull or an S, except when fighting 2 rank deep shield wall, unless you're an elephant, versus elephants, versus obstacles or barricades, including battle wagons, except unless you're an elephant. So that's the same as shatter. Okay. 2 or better deep close order infantry in good going versus loose or skirmish order infantry can cause a shove even if they don't have the characteristic. That's an advantage of being in close order. And shove gives a +1 to neighboring files. So it's like a little bit weaker than shatter. Shield wall can only be claimed to the front when in close formation and 2 ranks deep in good going. It cannot be claimed by tugs that have done a charge, countercharge, or intercept. 2 rank deep shield wall cancels all opposing shatter and shove results, unless it's an elephant. And 2 rank deep shield wall negates cavalry, or chariot melee expert because it keeps them at range. Number 7, expendable. Expendables covers all charge and forget troops. Expendables fight normally, but any S result in charge combat converts to a skull result. Expendables may not break off and are removed if still in combat when the enemy at the beginning of the end turn phase. So basically they charge, and then if they're still there, they blow up. In the case of being removed, they do not cause cab tests on friends. But if they're destroyed or routed, they do. They are not tugs and do not count towards your breakpoint. Okay, so expendables are just that, expendable. Okay, the next one, fanatic. Fanatic represents the most dedicated of fighters. Okay, unless otherwise noted in a specific army, a fanatic only retains this characteristic when they have a general in their line of command with them. Fanatics do not break at 50% as other UGs. All the bases must be killed, at which point the UG is deemed lost. Once completely lost, they count as a broken UG and cause cabs on friends as a lost tug. Note that if a general is required for them to be fanatic, and the general moves away from them or is killed in combat, they immediately lose fanatic status and will therefore break. Okay, I found a typo in the rules. It says status, they will therefore break if, and then it ends there. I assume what they're trying to say is the intent is they will break if they've already got too many wounds that would normally cause them to break because they lost their fanatic status. Okay, 9. Cantabrian. The Cantabrian circle, right? Cantabrian represents the best of the circulating firing formations. So it's free to convert in or out of Cantabrian as part of any move. Troops in Cantabrian upgrade their shooting from experienced to skilled as long as the shooting sug is not doing a runaway. Cantabrian still has a front and flank and is represented on the tabletop by leaving the front rank as is and turning the other bases of one file to face the rear or side. Okay, so if this was a cavalry unit, you would do something like that to represent that they're in a Cantabrian circle. Troops in Cantabrian cannot charge, countercharge, or intercept, and if charged, they must run away or skirmish, remaining in Cantabrian, if in skirmish. Note, they have a -1 on the variable distance roll, but do not lose 1 base width. If contacted, they immediately revert to normal formation. Okay, next one. African. Okay, African is a lot like Cantabrian. It represents the best of organized circulating fire for tugs, as used by some Byzantine cavalry. Okay, it is free to convert in and out as part of their move. Their speed is reduced by 1 base width. Troops in African still have fronts and rear and are represented by turning 1 front or rear base to face the rear. African upgrades shooting from experience to skilled as long as the shooting tug is not doing a runaway. So it's almost exactly like Cantabrian so far. Troops in African cannot charge, countercharge, intercept. That's all the same. Okay. It's all the same. Yeah, it's exactly the same. Cantabrian and African. Okay. Integral shooters. Integral shooter represents troops having archers behind their main ranks. Integral shooters do not count as missile focused for forced charges. Integral shooter gives charge combat claims against chargers when standing to receive a charge. +2 versus unprotected, +1 versus protected or fully armed, and there is no benefit versus fully armed, armored horse, protected, or armored horse fully armed. Represent on the tabletop should be by having a marker. A single skirmisher base is enough, or some suitable missile figures mixed into the bases. That's the way I would do it. Shoot and charge includes charge-only shooters. Shoot and charge covers troops who were adept at firing a volley and following it with a charge to take immediate advantage of the effect of their shooting. Okay, troops must start within shooting range to use shoot and charge, because you shoot first and then charge. The UG shoots immediately from its current position and range, and then and when it declares a charge. For added clarity, generals may prompt through fire to recover any slowing effect caused by shoot and charge. Shoot and charge cannot be used with a countercharge or intercept, which we deem to be a hurried response, not allowing time for their charge. Shoot and charge is an automatic characteristic free for troops who have charge-only shooters. So if you're a charge-only shooter, you get shoot and charge for free. Feigned flight. Feigned flight represents troops who are adept at taunting enemy into a charge to pull them into a trap. Feigned flight can only be taken by armies allowed in the army lists. Of course, that's with all abilities. An army with feigned flight can give the characteristic to any single sug or tug of flexible cav, or cavalry in its army. An UG with feigned flight is always treated as if a tug when considered when an enemy have force charges against it, even if they're in skirmish form. As a result, a SUG will cause enemy tugs to charge at 3 base widths, or 1 base width. In all cases, an enemy forced charge can be held as usual with prompted actions. Okay, so basically they try to draw you out. It's basically SUGs that cause force charges. Okay. Pavis. Pavis is like a giant shield. Pavis covers troops who carry a large freestanding personal barricade for missile protection. Pavis gives no benefit of any type if charging, countercharging, or intercepting. Normally it would be left behind. Pavis gives cover to those behind them when shot at by files who have all of their front edge ahead of the line in front of the Pavis. Pavis gives a +1 bonus in charge combat against any infantry. So, defending a charge. Players are encouraged to represent Pavis on the tabletop, but this is not compulsory. All distances are measured from the troop bases. Okay, it's kind of like stakes. I would have my troops, and then maybe I'll make some a separate bases that I would put in front that have the Pavises on them. Okay, that might be cool. Specifically like crossbowmen and stuff like that in the 100 Years' War. Shield cover. Shield cover represents troops with large shields who were able to lock them together for protection against missiles, like the Testudo. Files may choose to use shield cover when shot at in any shooting phase. They choose to do so before shooting dice are rolled. So if you're doing a charge and you shoot, you don't get shield cover. Bases that have used shield cover this turn may not shoot unless specified as an exception. UGs with any bases using shield cover suffer a 1 base width slowing that will affect their movement. Shield cover increases the target's armor level by 1 for unprotected to protected or protected to fully armored. Shield cover cannot be used in the charge phase, nor by any base engaged in combat. Shield cover can be used when shot at from the flank or rear, because they're like a testudo is all 4 sides. Okay. Orb. Orb represents the ability to form a square or orb with no flanks to attack, often a last stand or to hold a flank against cavalry. To form an orb, an UG must have all files at least 2 ranks deep. Changing into orb requires a yellow, and you must be greater than 2 base widths from an enemy tug. So you can't change into a square within 2 base widths. It's kind of like pinning them down from Napoleon's battles. Reverse the facing of the rear rank to show the troops are in orb. So, just like Napoleon's battles, if you've got your regiment or whatever set up right here to show that you form square, you just turn all the guys in the back facing to the rear. Okay. An orb fights 1 deep in all directions, but it has no flank or rear. Troops may only come out of orb by making a prompted action and can reform any facing prior to doing so. So yeah, so it can reform facing in any direction. While in orb, UGs may move one base width in any direction with a green, and it cannot charge or pursue. So an orb can move one base width. Caltrips. Caltrips cover troops carrying light spiked obstacles. Caltrips can be laid out at the end of deployment without playing cards, representing them being laid before battle commences or by playing cards. To lay caltrips requires an action, and troops must be greater than 2 base widths from the enemy. Okay, so you can lay it out during the game or before the game. A block move can be used to lay caltrips in front of several UGs. A tug with caltrips can claim barricades against cavalry chariots and elephants in charged combat only. So I might put little bases of caltrips out front. Okay. I don't have troops right now that have caltrips, but I can see myself making some caltrip bases. Because really it's just a marker saying that there's caltrips in front. Cavalry, and chariots, and elephants fighting defenders behind caltrips cannot count any claims that require good going. Those that are canceled if affected by terrain. However, they only give affected or badly affected claims to enemy or if they're in such terrain. So it cancels good going, but it doesn't automatically give them affected. Okay. Caltrips provide no cover against shooting, of course, because they're little metal things on the ground. UGs behind caltrips can move through them freely, at which point they are removed, and they can relay them later if desired. Okay, so they can just walk through and pick them up. Caltrips should be represented, okay, here it says it right here. Caltrips should be represented by thin bases placed in front of each file of an UG, which are moved to the back once the enemy make contact. If an enemy break off or breaks for any reason, a file has a free frontage again, the caltrips are placed back in the front. Okay, so what they're saying is, now see, this is a normal MeG-sized base, which is 20 millimeters deep, where this is a Field of Glory base, which is 15 millimeters deep. But I can see putting obstacles, pavis, caltrips, things like that on the 15 millimeter base, and then lay it in front, and then when they get charged, you pick this up and you put it in the back to represent that the caltrips are still there, and then when they're killed or cleared out or whatever, then you just go ahead and put it back in front. That is pretty awesome. I like it. I like it. I like it. Stakes. I bet you stakes are pretty much done the same way. Stakes can be stakes can be emplaced at the end of deployment, representing their emplacement before the battle. Otherwise, you can emplace them as a prompted action. You have to be greater than 4 base widths from an enemy. Okay. A block move can place them in front of several. Stakes provide no cover against shooting. A tug with stakes gets barricades in charge and melee. Cavalry and elephants fighting defenders behind stakes cannot count any claims, require good going. Very similar to caltrips. Troops behind stakes can move through them without penalty and may relay them later. Stakes should be represented by a thin base placed in front of each file, which is moved to the back once the enemy makes contact. All measurements and distance are always from the troop base. If enemy break off for any reason, place them back to the front. Exactly like caltroops. And I do need to make some stakes for my 100 Years' War armies. Barricades. Barricades represent troops behind permanent walling, fencing, flashing that may have been constructed prior to the battle. These are easy to defend and provide cover from shooting. Tugs so equipped deploy them immediately after any camp placement. Tugs deploying them must cover their entire frontage with barricades. Barricades should be represented by thin bases in front of the troops. UGs may lead barricades by moving through them. Barricades stay on the table, and if undefended, can be crossed by infantry only, but these are slowed by one base width, basically crossing a fence. If abandoned, and may be redefended from their original side only by reaching their defensible long edge and aligning to it, as long as no enemy are in contact with the barricade base. Barricade give claims in the combat table. They are cover when shot at. Cavalry and elephants fighting defenders behind barricades cannot count any claims. And SUGs, therefore artillery behind barricades attacked frontally, do not have to run away or skirmish and cannot be pushed back. Obstacles. Obstacles represent troops behind permanent ditches, ramps that have been constructed prior to battle. This is probably going to be very similar to barricades. Tugs so equipped deployed immediately after their camp must cover their entire frontage. They stay on the table. Crossers are slowed by 2 base widths, not 1. If abandoned, they can be reformed as long as no enemy within 2 base widths. Obstacles give barricade combat claims, but provide no cover, because it's basically like a ditch, not a wall. Cavalry is affected the same, SUGs, therefore artillery the same. And then obstacles should be represented by thin bases in front of troops. All measurements and distances are always from troop bases. So yeah. Okay, only a couple more here. Dismountable. Dismountable covers both mounted troops that at times dismounted to fight on foot and infantry who have campaigned and moved on horseback in order to fight on foot. Dismounting for both types requires a yellow, not possible in combat. Mounted tugs with dismountable can be dismounted at deployment for free. Those troops most comfortable dismounting to fight on foot have their types defined in the Army list. Others are less comfortable fighting on foot, but dismount when allowed per the rules. Infantry tugs with dismountable may choose to start the battle dismounted as normal infantry, but otherwise moved as formed loose cavalry when mounted, but may not charge, countercharge, intercept, skirmish, run away, or shoot while mounted. If contacted while mounted, dismountable infantry fight as if they're on foot, but are treated as combat shy. Once dismounted, troops cannot remount. In terms of representation, acceptable dismounted figures or markers must be provided, representing local guidance for figure accuracy and umpire decisions. Mounted infantry should have a cavalry-sized horse holder base behind every 2 infantry bases. Okay, now I did that with my American War of Independence. You get a couple of infantry bases and then a cavalry base behind it, and I put like 3 horses and a dude standing in front of the horse kind of holding the reins, because those are the horses that the infantry dismounted from. Okay. Fleet of foot. Fleet of foot represents troops who are light and quite agile. Tugs with fleet of foot use skirmisher movement distances except when doing a breakoff. There are no benefits other than this extra movement distance. Okay, fleet of foot basically means you get to move as a skirmisher. Keel. K-E-I-L. Tugs with keel characteristic are adept at protecting and fighting to flank when in large formations, like the Swiss and Landsknechts being the primary. A keel must begin as 8 or 12 bases as specified in their army list, and must be 2 files wide if an initial 8, or 3 files wide if an initial 12. Enemy files cannot claim the +4 flank against a keel, and rear, however, are just as devastating against keel as other troops. Okay, so rear is still okay, but they fight to their flanks as normal. Or actually they prevent troops from gaining a benefit. Alright guys, well that was the rules in its entirety, Mortimer Glorying Compendium Edition. I do have one more video that I want to do, and it's going to be this is the Maximus and Magna of the Compendium, not the Pacto. But I have learned quite a bit through my either the tutorials or through building my armies or just reading the rules, etc. I've learned quite a bit that I had to go back through the rules and piece together what I was missing. And what I'd like to do is a final video of what I've learned while doing this boot camp, as kind of a bringing it all together. And that will be the next video, and that'll probably be a casual, me just sitting in front of the camera talking to you guys. So look forward to that video coming out soon, and I'll catch you later.